call it. Ain't gotta be no psychic to see this is like the farthest thing from heaven. This is hell, and I don't mean that hyperbolic. I tried to find employment, even if it's white but tallest. But these felonies be making life the hardest. Peace. What's happening, y'all? Welcome back.
Good evening.
Good evening. It is Focus Friday, the Black Perspective, last Focus Friday of 2024. Yeah, we got some things to talk about today. It's gonna be on a little bit of a somber note, but we're gonna try to be in depth with this conversation. Also highlight some of the wonderful things that have happened throughout 2024. We will not end 2024 thinking about our demise or the end of anything. It's the beginning of the work as the work continues. The Black Perspective Focus Friday with Jamaica Miles and a special guest from After Incarceration. We have the brother Jose Pineda, very deep thinking brother, man, about the work, about the movement, and about liberation for all. Peace, my brother. How you doing today, this evening? With Jamaica Miles, let's take it away, man. Where are we going today?
I mean, you mentioned that we're going to be here on a bit of a somber moment as we are going to have a discussion about the fact that the New York State Attorney General today released a video of the murder of someone who was behind the wall and their life was taken by those who were supposed to be in care of them. Robert Brooks, unfortunately, no longer is with us. And for us to discuss, in this moment, where my background says no one is free until we're all free, right? All of us needs to be free. We have had this conversation before. All three of us have had this conversation individually, each other, talking about state-sanctioned violence. All of us released a statement after incarceration, released statements. A lot of folks are talking about this unfortunate incident that is far too common of police brutality behind the wall. And so just our perspective of what this means, not just in this moment, but unfortunately the longstanding issue that we have.
So just to put a fine point on exactly who Robert Brooks was in the situation that we're talking about, his murder at the hands of several correctional officers in the Department of Corrections. Brooks was 43 years old. He was pronounced dead at the hospital the morning after the assault. The assault happened on December 9th at Marcy Correctional Facility, which is the state prison in Oneida County. 13 correctional officers and a nurse are implicated in the attack and now facing termination, according to the New York State Governor, Kathy Hochul, who says she is outraged and horrified by the videos of the senseless killing. The footage was made public today, which shows correctional officers repeatedly punching Brooks in the face and groin as he sits handcuffed, unable to defend themselves on a medical examination table in the medical wing. One officer uses the shoe to strike Brooks in the stomach. Another yanks him. I mean, there's a lot. Like, if you want to see the video, we're not going to show it here today, but it is available to see online. It is gruesome. It is another. I think me and Jose, we talked about this earlier. It is akin to a lynching, right, of an individual that's incarcerated. I don't know what other way to talk about it. It's horrific what happened to Brooks.
Jose, your thoughts?
I'm taking it in, thinking about it. Like Sean and I, have been back and forth about this like since early this morning, and thinking about how Robert Brooks basically stands in for every incarcerated individual and the relationship that the prison guards feel they have to power to be able to use and abuse our bodies however they see fit without consequence, even to the point of death. And it's like, man, this one hits home because many of us are survivors of the exact same. I watched that video. I also lived that video in 2005 at Coxsackie Correctional Facility, and then did time in solitary confinement with other people who lived that. And it's like, wow, we thought we were lucky to save our teeth because that's all I cared about when they jumped me, not letting them knock my teeth out. Now I realize how at risk of death we have always been. So.
And I appreciate that Danielle Williams, who is watching and has been a local advocate in the Capital Region for folks behind the wall, including her own family members, is mentioning in the chat right now that earlier, like, other individuals have died behind the wall and died under circumstances of being attacked and abused by corrections officers. And we don't always hear in mass media, we often don't hear in mass media the names of individuals behind the wall that are assaulted, abused, or killed. And I find it hypocritical that Kathy Hochul has, like, thank goodness she's like, oh my gosh, these people should be fired, because there's a video that the New York State Attorney General was absolutely going to release. Tish James has indeed been vigilant in her position to bring justice for individuals. But Kathy Hochul's not known for justice for anybody that is, your average everyday person, let alone marginalized groups, and heaven forbid somebody that's behind the wall. So I think it was more for me, oh, well, Kathy had to do this because she knew that the video was coming out.
I agree. I think that because the video was absolutely going to come out and it was going to spark outrage, which it has and which it should. This is politics at its best. It's politics, because if you really care, there's several actions that Kathy could have taken in the previous months, years, while she's been in office, to help address kind of what we know as commonplace and throughout correctional facilities. There's an air of invulnerability. Each facility operates can operate as a fiefdom, in and of itself, and it's without clear policy about controls for what happens inside these prisons. This will continue to happen time and time again. It's really unfortunate, because there are things that could happen that could help address it. But I'm thinking about, like, what I witnessed, on the video, and how many times I've seen similar things happen during my own incarceration, but without people actually dying. This is something that just happens far too often to too many individuals, because there's this air of, like, I don't have to care, and there isn't really any accountability. All right. And I think that's the part that hurts the most for most people watching this. His brother was already serving a significant sentence for some time. And what happens is, you're not just sentenced to do time, you're sentenced to be perpetually punished as well. Right. And, when you witness so many people just standing around watching, it was as if this is every day. There's nothing shocking here. There's nobody that was, like, holding their mouth and they couldn't believe what was going on.
Laughing.
The nurses, you have some nurses that were peeking in to see what was going on, and then going back to their business. And that's because the culture of incarceration, the culture of the carceral state, absolutely allows for these things to happen. And it also punishes those who would speak up. You know what I mean? It is. There's a veil of protection and violence that is almost impenetrable, because it just protects itself constantly. When you file in grievances, you're filing against the people that are a part of the same problem, right? When you're saying something's happening, something's going on, and Daniel Williams knows this better than so many. It's like there is no one there to help. There is no help. Far too often, there is no help unless you die, right? And then there can be some action happening. If you're not dead and you're just beat up a little bit, the story will always be, it was your fault, right?
Yeah.
And look at his history.
And Danielle mentions that, can the state be trusted to investigate the state wrongdoing? Something I learned today that I didn't know when I was reading the story and reading articles from the Marshall Project and other sources, is that when there is an investigation into a corrections officer, their contract, right? Because they have a union, and there's a whole nother conversation about whether or not cops and corrections officers should even have a union. But there is within that contract, that it's a third-party arbitrator that determines whether or not a correction officer has done something wrong, whether or not they can be disciplined, whether or not they can be fired. And those arbitrators are largely lawyers. So it's not individuals that are looking at this with any sense of, recognizing their bias. And I think the statistic was something like over 80% or over 88% of the time there's nothing. They just go back to work.
Yeah.
That's it. Which we see that same thing happen in our local police departments, right? That civilian police review boards have no power when there even is a complaint. Albany Local Law J has given it some teeth, have given it some authority, but largely there is no oversight for our police department, and the internal investigation tends to support law enforcement.
Yeah.
And the unions support law enforcement.
I want to jump into some of the details, right? Just in thinking about how this was even captured on film, and this is actually a policy benefit, right? So the body cams came behind the reason why they're even wearing body cams in the first place is because of policy changes, right? That the body cams got put in. That's because of advocates like you two and so many others across the state that were pushing for some kind of policy to help hold folks accountable when these things happen, right? But here's something that's very interesting, right? You have these individuals, correctional officers with body cams on. Many of them didn't turn them on. Some of them turned them off, but because some didn't turn them off, it was passively recording what was happening, right? So it wasn't intentional, right, on their part, on the individual's part, but it was intentional behind the equipment that we were wearing, that they were able to still capture what happened. Think about that, right? You had people that intentionally turn their body cams off, and I know a memo went out from the commissioner to make sure, like, moving forward, that everyone makes sure that have their body cams on and operating, and that if someone doesn't, that they're obligated as first reporters to make sure that it gets turned on. But why wasn't that policy already something that was enacted, right? I think that, so there's two ways I'm thinking about this. It's horrible what happened, obviously, to Robert Brooks, and my condolences to his family and all his loved ones and to individuals that know that he was with, right, before he gets dragged off by the correction officers that he was with, that know what happened and are now going through their own traumas with no kind of support, right? Because, like, Jose, you mentioned this. I don't know if you want to dig into that a little bit, but you mentioned this to me, that what happens with the support for the individuals, that actually know what that happened, and are now sitting back where they are, not knowing what's coming next.
Yeah, I'd love to say out loud to whoever is listening that there is a college in prison program inside Marcy Correctional Facility. If an incident like this had happened in one of the dorms or in the infirmary on the Mohawk Valley Community College campus, there would be tremendous support for the students who had survived the incident of violence on their campus and in their living space. What I'm saying is that the State University of New York, through Mohawk Valley Community College, owes the incarcerated students in their college and prison program, where they're running up their enrollment numbers by giving basically their program is the worst SUNY program that we have. I know this firsthand, right? But judgment aside, they owe all students a measure of support when they are enrolled. And that support cannot be kept out of the prison in an instant like this. The public needs to demand that there is additional supports to help the people that are going to continue to live in that space and be expected to effectively rehabilitate themselves through college and prison programming. Those people need additional supports now. And I think that we can build on the body camera policy enforcement working to then now call other systems operators to enforce their own policies, because these campuses have policies that dictate what happens when an act of violence happens on campus. and the campuses have to go through Middle States and the Department of Education to get certified as an off-site campus, meaning that the college tells the government and Middle States that the students have all the same access to privileges and protections as the ones on campus. If that is not true, then the accreditation of their program is suspect. So I feel like we can demand that something is done for this at least that group of students. Thank you for asking me that question.
And something that folks don't realize, right? Because some people will be like, oh, there's programs inside that help them, but not considering who they're connected to, if they're connected to universities and colleges, what does that mean? And to your point, right? Not to reiterate it, but to reiterate it, that if you are a student of a college or university, whether it is at one location or another, those policies and practices are supposed to be applied to all students, regardless of location.
Well, that's that's I don't know, that's an ideal way for the programs to operate. It doesn't always happen in that way. I know that there are many folks that push, and there has been some, I think, steps towards that for students that are incarcerated. But I wanted to bring that up just because it's just another kind of ramification, right? And this ripple effect from what happened to this brother and now to his family. It is a sad story. I don't really want to talk too much about upsides and like where we go. Like that it kind of feels too early. This happened on December 9th. I was on a retreat with a bunch of other brothers and sisters that were formerly incarcerated that do similar work and beyond what I do from across the country. And it was about like being able to find ways to deal with our own traumas and issues that we survived while we were incarcerated and that we deal with and wear on our shoulders while we're home. And then coming back home and like getting a whiff of this in the news, I got a piece of it. And then the brother Jose hit me up and just gave me even more details. Then I started scouring the net and I'm like, wow, like this is something that we have to talk about. And here we are talking about it. And if you want to, for folks that aren't familiar, and I feel like most of the people watching this are familiar because I'm looking at Daniel Williams in the chat, Leslie Peltier and some others kind of talking about their experiences, dealing with their folks with the correction systems and also with their peoples and having to deal with the correction system, just zooming out, right, for the unawares. There's a nearly $4 billion budget in New York State for half the population. Maybe 15 years ago, Jose, it was maybe 70,000+. It's cut in half right now. The budget hasn't changed that much. Many folks lost their jobs because of it. But there's 30,000+ prison folks that are incarcerated in New York State and state correctional facilities, right? Nearly as many officers, I believe. I'd actually let me back up on that statement. But I believe at one time it was near 20 to 25, 30,000 officers. I could be wrong about that. Fact check me and take a look, right? I think that what me and Jose were speaking to earlier is just the persistence and consistency of this culture of violence that basically devalues everyone that comes through wearing green. And it leaves this space where people feel like it is okay to operate in this way. And without accountability, without clear accountability for what's happening, which we're going to see in this instance, but this ain't the first instance, right? But it's the first instance that we were witnessing on body cam and the brutality, the way it is. We're going to see some accountability, but the way they are talking about it, Jamaica and Jose, is what I have a problem with. Once again, this crazy things happen. You have 13, 14 people that are witnessing what's going on and participating in what's going on, but yet they're still saying the same story. It's just a few bad apples, right? It's just a few. It's not everyone. It's just most of them are really great people and they really do great jobs and they don't do any of this. The question I have is, okay, you looked it up. Sorry, you looked it up. Okay. Of course you did. So look, you got 26,400 individuals as of March 23rd. including approximately 15,200 uniformed corrections officers. Okay. All right. So uniforms, staff, 15,000, which is about half the population that are there. So that's 1 for every 2 damn near. And then you have 26,000 in total of just staff in general. It's a large population of
Yeah.
staff to cover for only 30,000+ people that are incarcerated.
Those are
It's a
jobs,
job.
Sean.
It's an entire industry. It's an entire industry
job.
in certain communities.
And
Go
those
ahead,
jobs
Jose.
are
I see
where?
through you show the well, they're in the upstate, more
Yeah.
rural communities. Go ahead, brother.
Yeah, just I was scrolling over through the chat. I don't really technologically great. I'm just happy that I got my Attica brothers in the background. You know what I'm saying? Call upon our ancestors to remember the human dignity that we've been demanding for forever, basically. You know what I'm saying? And all of the fake semblances of justice that have been applied to like just get people to be complacent, and how complacency is killing us. But the hate crime, someone mentioned something about a hate crime. So one of the things that is really interesting to me is that all of the guards that I saw actively and enthusiastically attack this person were wearing the American flag inverted from left to right.
Yeah.
And all the other guards who were complacent in a watching way, and maybe had done some other things too. I can't really tell, but there is clear consistency that all of the guards with the flip patch were doing something to either cover up or to hurt this person. And so what I would want to say, first of all, the flipping of the flag is not the same as the inversion of the flag, but it's important to know that the blue on the left-hand side symbolizes our union, and the flipping of the blue outside of a place of honor, it's switching the space of our union and states' rights. And when guards go to work with that flipped, prisoners see them and know who they are. And so when we talk about the collateral consequences of an act like this, every prisoner in Marcy knows that any guard that has their flag inverted from left to right would be down with killing them at any given moment, period. And I want to know, how pervasive is that? One, in how many facilities across the state are guards actively disrespecting the flag and inverting it for some subconscious or white supremacist dog whistle? And whether or not that's going to be considered an act of terrorism. Maybe we need to get the largest gang of correctional officers out of there, because one of those people with the switch flag had 4 bars on his arm, which means that he had been working in the prison system for 20 years. Each one of those bars is 5 years.
Yeah.
And he's probably like the union leader over there or something.
I mean, there's like so much in such a short amount of time for us to potentially dig into, but understanding that there's all types of psychology behind what happens in a situation where someone is put in the position that corrections officers are put in, to have that type of power over human beings and how they treat them. And Sean already mentioned, like, it is a culture of violence. This is not whether every single guard is a part of some type of gang or some type of white supremacist group, isn't even necessary given the culture of violence inside our prisons and jails, right? Because to the point that has already been made, there were individuals that were actively assaulting this individual, this Black man who was handcuffed and restrained, right? They were beating him to death. They were choking him. And others stood and watched. And by act of omission, you are supporting that violence, because there is no neutrality. Neutrality is the side of the oppressor. That is clear. That is understood. And knowing that, oh, well, they could retaliate against corrections officers if they speak up, or they could this, or I could lose my job. This man lost his life. He lost his life. And others have too. And for individuals that haven't lost their lives, it's still not okay. And this has been something that's been talked about by all of us since 2020. something that's been talked about by freedom fighters for decades, for hundreds of years, right? The inception of this country is through acts of violence against marginalized folks by creating division and stealing and all of those things. As y'all were talking, I was looking back because, Sean, you may remember, we created 13 demands back in 2020, right? And a number of them absolutely apply to this particular case as well as the fight that we continue. Number one was demanding accountability for all law enforcement and corrections officers for all violations of the civil rights of all people of color, marginalized individuals, and all peoples for, but not limited to, killings, beating, false arrest, and harassment. The banning of chokeholds, the banning of that if a body cam is disengaged intentionally or otherwise, the individual is supposed to be, fired, period. These are things that we've been talking about for almost 5 years now, right? And we understand the importance of us continuing that fight going forward. While we have this one very visual case that's in front of us, and Tish James, and a New York State Attorney General that is willing to fight cases that were never fought before, right? She still pushing Saratoga for their civil rights violations against activists. So we have a moment here in New York where I think that we could continue to push forward. I personally hate that we have to live with, the rest of us survive this senseless and avoidable death because it wasn't necessary. It should have never happened. And people are worried there's going to be an uprising. And I saw a quote from, I think it was the commissioner for docs or whatever. I'm so concerned about the safety of our officers after the video goes public. As if people inside don't already know that this is happening. As if Danielle Williams and others outside don't already know that this is happening. That the larger public, similar to what happened during the civil rights era, that folks knew that racist things were happening, that police brutality was happening, but then when it was televised on your screen, that dogs were attacking Black folks and hoses were being used on Black folks, then it was the larger population that was outraged. So when elected officials and commissioners are like, oh, I'm worried about safety and that there's going to be violent acts because of this isolated incident. No, you're worried that the rest of the world goes, oh shit, they weren't lying.
It's interesting that you say that, the rest of the world being engaged. I mean, I would hope so, right? I would hope that that's the case. I'm feeling like we've moved. I feel like the paradigm has shifted a bit in the country. And sentiments that may have once, been something we could rely on when it comes to like the video being released and people seeing it and being outraged. I don't know if it exists in the same way. I mean, I hope it does for many people, but I don't know if it exists in the same way just because how comfortable we've as a society have gotten with witnessing these type of acts and doing nothing and nothing happening, right? Nothing serious happens, right? There was, I can remember, so many kids being killed in schools and, babies being killed and being outraged and like all of the stuff and then nothing happening. Right. And, I'm not trying to put a downer on like what's happening moving forward, because I know there's going to be people that are activated right now about this and are organizing, getting ready to do whatever they can to ensure that policies happen, that this doesn't ever happen again. But that is a concern that I have. And like for others that are watching that aren't used to watching all of us, like hearing where we're coming from, you look at that, like we talk about same thing we talk about with the police, right? I know Malcolm, so many people talked about this. It ain't about the individual. Somebody could say, like, I know that these jobs landing in these particular communities sometimes the only industry that they got. And I'm not saying you don't have my justice, Lynn. I'm not making excuses for anybody in the jobs that they decide to take or the verse they don't take, right? But these jobs are usually the best paying job, the most stable, the most whatever in these certain communities, and a lot of folks show up in these places not necessarily being who they become, right? Because of the culture. And anyone that I've seen people leave who were a rookie in their first year or two, and they're like, I ain't doing, I don't want to be a part of this. And I've seen people stay, and I've seen them change over time. So this isn't so much about the individuals, right, that show up. It's the culture, the weight of that culture that creates this atmosphere where something like this feels okay, right? Where something like this feels like it's not something that we have to worry about, that we can do this with impunity, right? That's the problem. And it doesn't change. It does not change until we start changing things in policy and changing from the top. I don't believe an incarceration has ever worked in the way that it's been told that it works. And I don't think moving forward that it's a credible system that keeps anyone safe, right? And I see a message here from Jose. You wanna? Is it?
I was
Okay,
just
go ahead,
putting in
brother.
there when you mentioned it as an economic incentive to be a correction officer.
Yeah.
That's the intersection of capitalism and racism anyway. Like they need each
Yeah.
other to survive, right? But the one guard, I think his name is Anthony Farina or something. He resigned right away. He's the person that's most implicated in this. He resigned within 24 hours, and on a base salary of $80,000 a year, he brought in over $150,000 last year. So he was making over $150,000 a year and still felt like the people that he had custody over that were nothing. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
and punishing these people is not going to be enough for us. I want to see people go down. I want to see anybody who has ever have any evidence of them being part of a white supremacist group that wears their flag inverted. I don't care if they're in Attica, anywhere. I want to see the commissioner come down and suspend 10,000 officers for being a part of this terrorist organization that literally has been lynching people since the inception of mass incarceration, basically.
Except right now, there's not the power to do that because of the union, because of the contract that exists. And I forget what year it was added to the contract. The only way that a corrections officer can be fired if arbitration says, no, they can't be fired, right? So a third party arbitrator says, we reviewed it. We don't think they should be fired. Only a court can overrule it. So in this case, because someone was murdered, because they unalived him, the attorney general is able to intervene. But outside of that, the number of individuals every single day across New York State that are beaten and abused and neglected have no way out.
Right. Well, imagine this, right, for a second. Imagine a member of a particular incarcerated gang, right, a member of the Bloods who wears a particular sign, acted in this way in coercion as a group, right? The attorney general would be asking, who's your big homie? I want to know who their big homie is. I want to know who the Ku Klux Klan leader is in the Mohawk Valley that they got in Mid-State right across the street. A judge just ruled that people have been systemically abused and sodomized and treated inhumanely for years right across the street. There's something going on in that part of this state that the attorney general must have the ability to, because it's criminal. If you're a part of an organization that is actively terrorizing citizens, this is the only thing that I loved or liked about the attorney general's statement, is that she said it was an investigation into the death of a citizen. She identified that Robert Brooks was a citizen, and the police had taken his life. And so then that means where are their cohorts? Somebody's in collusion to this, and they all need to pay. They'll start telling on each other left and right.
But the question is, will we be able to maintain that presence and that outside pressure to ensure that there is accountability and that the follow through happens? I don't have any doubts that Tish James and her office are going to investigate. But as we know far too many times, there will be a swell, a rising up of individuals who in a moment are absolutely furious and I can't believe this happened and how dare they, and we want accountability. And then when the news cycle ends, folks go home.
Mhm.
And what we need is for folks not to go home.
Yeah.
We need like 1,000 Danielle Williams. And I know, Danielle, I've said your name a lot. I miss you, sis. I appreciate you every single day, the things that you share and the work that you do, and your advocacy just as an individual. And there are others like Danielle who are fighting that fight either with or without an organization, but we need that moment to continue. We're about to end 2024. And lots of folks are talking about the inauguration. We're talking about Martin Luther King Jr. Day, the end to militarism, the end to poverty, the end to racism, all which intersect with the prison industrial complex. And if we're going to continue this fight, right, because we should be calling for justice and demanding it. And it can't just be this weekend. It can't just be the weekend after that. We need to find those opportunities to continue to fight, to change policies, to change laws, to come together and be united. And yeah, I'm going to drop it right now that on January 20th, there's an opportunity for us to have a larger gathering.
Yeah.
As we're looking for these opportunities to stand together and say, we demand justice for all of us. And that includes our community that's behind the wall.
And always has. That's something that we, as all of us, have always made a point to make sure that we talk about. When we talk about the community, we talking about all of our community.
Yeah.
Right? Where too many times that people incarcerated are separated out from the rest of the community. They have an impact here too. They have families here. They're from here, and it's important that we continue to acknowledge that. I also want to point out something that we could have been talking. This is the end of the year. Right? We're going into 2025. It's a lot of time for people to get with family, people to reflect on the year that come. We could have did a lot more of that. We felt like this was something extremely important for us to talk about and focus on and lock in on. We have had a year, Jamaica Miles. Like we've done a lot, and we will share some videos and all that stuff in the new year about what happened in 2024. Just a kind of a clock winding down on the year type thing. But today it's all about Robert Brooks. It's about the culture of violence inside and what we do about it. It's about honoring that memory, honoring that life. And I really appreciate my brother Jose Panetta for putting emphasis on this in our conversation earlier. Because if we didn't sit back and have that conversation, we may not be doing this live in this way. Because me and Jamaica, we were thinking about, well, maybe we take this day off and just bring in a new year and then come back on the next Friday in the new year and have more conversation. So I appreciate you, brother. You always staying locked in and focused on, seeing what's happening around you. So I appreciate you having that conversation with me. I just wanted to let you know that. I know we're coming up at time, and I appreciate Danielle Williams and Leslie Peltier for staying active in the chat. Danielle, you already know we've had tons of conversations about this. Not just what happened with Robert Brooks, but so many others. And I appreciate you staying in the fight because it is a fight, and you got to know you in a fight. You ain't got no shot if you don't know. So, as Jamaica said, let's stay active. Let's not let the momentum go away. If you really care about this, if you understand that we're fighting for our entire community, then you can find a way to be involved and step up and have your voice heard with the rest of us. It only happens with the collective work. So we're here for it always on Focus Friday and every other day of the week.
Absolutely. So we wind down 2024 the same way that we started off: the call for justice, the call for freedom, the call for liberation, and doing that in unity and solidarity and ensuring that it's all of us that finds the ability to thrive and no one struggling to survive, whether you're out here in the community or we're waiting for you to come home from behind the wall. Thank you, Jose, for joining us. Definitely appreciate you being here and joining this conversation. I know that we'll have lots more to talk about next Friday. Be sure to check out our link tree, follow us on socials, follow After Incarceration on Instagram and all those things. And we'll see y'all next year. Stay safe, everybody.
Peace.
Peace, y'all.